Transformed by Art3misiA. Summary. Draco and Charlie have a dragon to catch, and time is running out. Meanwhile, Hermione is missing, adding to Draco's woes. A Dramione fanfiction.
Mr. Malfoy, intel says the dragon has been sighted over Gloucestershire.
Draco sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose, trying his best to resist snapping at the young apprentice.
Gloucestershire is huge, Belby. Can you be any more specific? What part was it spotted in? Sorry. It was spotted over Painswick several hours ago, heading for the hills behind.
Belby was practically bouncing on his toes, so excited was he at the prospect of tracking the magical creature. This was Draco's first time taking on an apprentice. He'd been working at the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures for 5 years now, and Michaels, his supervisor, had insisted, despite Draco's protest and to his enormous chagrin, that he take responsibility for one of their department's fresh-faced new recruits. Draco stood and summoned his gear, fire-resistant jacket, trousers, and cloak, fully stocked first aid kit with plenty of healing potions and burn paste, notebook, magical camera, and omen oculars.
"Send a Patronus to Charlie Weasley, will you?"
instructed Belby.
"He'll be on standby at George's shop. Tell him to meet us at the Kimsbury Hill Fort, then collect your gear and return here."
Belby nodded enthusiastically.
"Yes, Mr. Malfoy, right away."
He turned on his heels and rushed from the room. With the few minutes of precious alone time he would have before Belby came back, Draco closed his eyes and took several deep breaths, focusing his mind in preparation for the task ahead. If the intel was good, and it was indeed the dragon they had been chasing, they would need to proceed with extreme care. Although the creature, thought to be a female, wasn't overly aggressive, reports indicated that she was injured, and that she spooked very easily and would flee at the slightest indication that humans were about. It was imperative that they catch her as soon as possible and transport her to a reserve Charlie Weasley worked at, so she could be properly examined and treated. A clatter of feet heralded Belby's appearance, and Draco's focus was forcefully brought back to the present.
"Do you have everything you need, Belby?"
he asked.
"Yes, Mr. Malfoy, right here."
Belby held up his satchel of equipment in one hand and his protective clothing in the other.
"Right then, let's get going."
Draco led the way out of their department into the lift and across the atrium. Out of the corner of his eyes he spotted one of those Salazar-be-damned journalists from the Prophet hanging about the flues, and made for the other end of the row, hoping to avoid her. Alas, she spotted him. It was the hair, always the hair, and moved to intercept his progress with a speed that would have been impressive in any other situation.
"Mr. Malfoy, any news of the whereabouts of Hermione Granger?"
"Why don't you go ask the Aurors? It's their job to find missing persons, not mine. Sod off, will you? Can't you see I'm busy?"
The journalist was undeterred by his attempt to dismiss her.
"But you've been working so closely with her the last few months, have you not? What have you to say in response to the rumors that you had something to do with her disappearance?"
She pressed, dogging his heels like a dog. Draco was just about to turn around and give her the famous Malfoy dressing down, and perhaps a subtle threat to hex her into next week, when Belby spoke up from his elbow.
"Listen here, you cheeky bint. Mr. Malfoy is a good man, and he would never harm Miss Granger. It's people like you who are the problem, spreading lies and allowing prejudice to continue. You're a bloody disgrace, you are. Now piss off before I summon the Aurors and have you trespassed for harassing ministry employees."
The journalist was so taken aback by the venom in Belby's voice that she stopped short, blinking after them in disbelief. A momentary lapse allowed them to make a quick getaway through the network, and a few moments later they were stumbling into the leaky cauldron. As they stepped through the stone arch behind the pub and into bustling Diagon Alley, Draco said to Belby,
"You shouldn't have talked to her in that way." They're bound to print some shit about you being a Death Eater sympathizer, or some other bollocks now. I don't care, Baby said. I hate how they talk about you, to you. Not just the vultures that work for the press, but people in general.
Draco smiled, strangely touched.
Thank you, Baby. I appreciate your support. Mr. Malfoy,
Baby continued hesitantly.
Has there been any news about Miss Granger?
There had, but not the kind he wanted the Wizarding World to know about. It wasn't that he didn't think he could trust Belby. It was just that the fewer people who knew Hermione's secret, the better. What she had managed to accomplish, and what dangers that accomplishment had exposed her to, would create a great deal of contention.
Nothing substantial as yet, but the Auras are confident she's still alive and not in any great danger. Just a little bit of danger.
They reached the apparition point.
Right, remember, Belby. Picture Kimsbury Hill Fort very clearly and enunciate the words. Else you're likely to end up Merlin knows where, or splinched. Yes, Mr. Malfoy. I'll see you there.
Belby, all business now, quickly checked he had all his belongings before turning sharply and disappearing with a small pop. Draco checked his own inventory before following, arriving moments later inside the famous Muggle landmark. He glanced around. Charlie hadn't arrived yet. The experienced Dragon Keeper was one of the few that knew everything about the creature they were chasing, hence the importance of having him with them. While they were waiting, Draco and Belby prepared themselves. They donned their protective clothing and strapped their equipment to their bodies. After several more minutes, Charlie appeared, already wearing his gear.
What's the game plan?
He asked quietly, his cobalt blue eyes focused on Draco.
Watch and wait,
Draco replied.
If we see the dragon and confirm it's the one that needs help, we'll need to approach slowly and carefully. You'll be the best man for that. Once you have her trust, call us and we'll come. It's the only way we'll get her to the sanctuary safely.
They set up camp, then cast detection spells around the area, both to confirm a dragon had been nearby recently and to alert them if one should appear within their perimeter. Then they settled in to wait. A day and a half later, the sensor for the North Quadrant was triggered, and Charlie immediately sprang into action. He disillusioned himself and apparated to the location while Draco and Belby waited anxiously back at the camp for Charlie's update. After nearly 3 hours, his Patronus reached them.
It's her. She's calm. Calm now.
Draco and Belby arrived not long after. Belby gasped in wonder. It was the first time he had seen a dragon up close. She was a large Hebridean black, with brilliant purple eyes that seemed to stare into your very soul. Her scales glinted in the late afternoon sun, and the large, dangerous-looking spike on the end of her long tail was a reminder not to take her lightly.
Hello, beautiful,
Draco said softly. She turned to look at him and gave a gentle snort, then slowly lowered her head and nudged him.
She seems to know you,
Belby observed.
Don't be foolish. She's simply responding to my calm manner and tone of voice,
Draco replied. He turned to Charlie and added,
Is she injured? A gash on her right flank. Quite a nasty one. It will be causing her pain,
Charlie said. Draco moved to join the red-headed wizard, examining the wound himself from a safe distance. It was rather nasty and looked to be infected. They would need to get her to the reserve quickly so it could be tended to.
We'll give her the strongest sleeping draught we have. Once she's under, it will be safe to call in the other trainers and transport her,
Charlie explained. Draco nodded and went looking for a large rock that would be suitable for transfiguring into a giant trough, while Charlie rummaged in his bag for the draught. Once everything was ready, the three wizards worked together to fill the transfigured trough with water. Then Charlie added the draught.
Here you go, lovely. Some nice cool water. Drink it all, you'll feel better,
said cheerfully to the dragon. She moved forward cautiously and regarded the man before her with her deep purple eyes, then turned to the water and sniffed at it. After a moment she lowered her snout and drank deeply. The draught was strong, and after only half an hour she was sound asleep. Charlie sent his Patronus to the team that had been on standby, and they arrived within minutes of his summon. Everyone worked quickly to secure the dragon inside the transportation crate. Then, with a series of spells, they were off. The team rode broomsticks, with lines connecting them to the crate, while Draco, Belby, and Charlie took a portkey to the reserve so they would have time to prepare for her arrival. Draco steeled himself. The moment of truth was near. He needed to be prepared for any eventuality. They arrived in plenty of time, landing just inside the main entranceway. Charlie snuck a glance at Draco, then turned to Belby with a wide, easy grin.
Draco and I need to go and tend to some paperwork. The common area's over there.
He pointed to a collection of buildings nearby.
There's a food hall, an ablution block, and a small shop. If you want a kip, ask the supplies hut, and they'll sort you a room. Just so you're with me, and you'll be grand. We'll come and collect you once we're done. It might take a while, Draco added. Entertain yourself, within reason, and don't wander off on your own, or you're likely to get eaten.
Belby nodded, looking both excited at the prospect of exploring the sanctuary and a little terrified at the prospect of becoming a snack for a hungry dragon. With a brief wave, he disappeared in the direction of the buildings Charlie had indicated. When he was out of earshot, Charlie said quietly,
Do you think we'll be able to help her? She was in a bad way. This is all new to me. Of course,
Draco replied, trying to exude a confidence he didn't truly feel as they turned and headed towards the delivery point.
She'll be fighting fit again in no time.
The team responsible for transporting the dragon would be using modified brooms that were capable of traveling over long distances within a short period of time. Even with the additional speed, it would take them several hours to arrive, but still it was better than nothing. On standard brooms, the trip would have taken more than a day, and time was of the essence. When the team finally arrived, the dragon was taken straight to the isolation and recovery enclosure. The team leader stayed only long enough to report to Charlie that the trip had been uneventful before departing, leaving Draco and Charlie alone with the dragon. Charlie retrieved invigorating potions and protective gear from a small supply room, while Draco searched in his satchel for the items he would need. He fervently hoped it would work. If it didn't, if they couldn't help her, he didn't know what he would do.
Draco, it's time.
He turned. Charlie was cradling the dragon's head in the crook of one arm, carefully pouring the invigorating potion into her mouth. That done, he cast several spells that would help keep her calm as she awoke and slow down her movements. Charlie stood back, joining Draco, and they watched. After a short time, the dragon stirred. She blinked her eyes, lifted her head, and shook it slowly, then looked around. She spotted Draco and Charlie.
Hello, lovely,
Charlie said, stepping forward carefully with his hand extended.
I hope your head feels all right. Sorry about the potions. They'll wear off soon.
Draco moved to join Charlie and summon the water trough, then cast a spell to fill it with water.
We've got something that should help,
he said, maintaining eye contact with her. He held up the vial containing the potion so she could see it, then popped the cork and poured the liquid into the trough, mixing it with the water. The dragon eyed Draco, then the water, suspiciously. She bent her head forward, sniffed, then hissed.
I know it doesn't smell too enticing, lovely, but it'll get you well again.
Charlie coughed. She stared intensely at them both, and Draco began to worry she'd refuse to drink. Then where would they be? She needed to drink the potion before he could use the spell. At last, however, she lowered her snout to the water, and he breathed a sigh of relief. The dragon began to cough, and Draco quickly raised his wand, making the complicated movement he'd practiced over and over, with McGonagall reciting the spell they had hoped would work. She wanted to be here to help, but it would have been too risky. The headmistress would have looked too out of place on a Romanian dragon reserve, and they couldn't risk speculation and gossip. Smoke billowed from the dragon's nose, quickly filling the enclosure. Draco and Charlie cast a bubblehead charm and worked to clear the air. As the smoke faded, the enclosure suddenly seemed empty. Any observer might have thought that the dragon had somehow escaped. Lying on the ground at his and Charlie's feet was a small, huddled figure with a large, nasty-looking gash on their leg. Draco quickly conjured a large warm cloak and draped it over the shivering naked body. A face he knew well peered up at him, her expression both bewildered and frightened.
"Hello, Hermione,"
he said softly. She sat in an armchair in Charlie's hut, warmly clothed with both hands clasped firmly around a steaming cup of tea and a blanket draped around her shoulders. The gash on her leg was covered and healing, thanks to the potions and paste Charlie had on hand. A plate of toast, barely touched, sat on a small table beside her. Draco and Charlie sat together on a small couch opposite. I'm trying to get my head around it all. I really am, but 4 months?
I know it's a lot to take in, but yes, you've really been stuck in your animagus form that long,
Draco said.
The gaps in your memory and the difficulty in reconciling time is to be expected. Charlie nodded in agreement. Dragons don't tend to have much use for calendars and dates. They set their own schedules.
It was meant to be a joke, and Hermione's lips twisted up in a forced half-smile, but Draco could tell she didn't see the humor in the situation. And you really think it's to do with this? She touched her chest in a place where Dolohov's scar lay hidden beneath her clothes.
As far as our research has been able to tell us, it's likely, Draco said. Luckily, the bastard is still alive and not completely mad. Pretty impressive, really, given it's his second stint in Azkaban. We convinced him it was in his best interest to tell us as much as he could about the curse he used on you.
The smile Hermione gave in response to Draco's word was more genuine. She raised an eyebrow and looked at him knowingly. Dare I ask what methods you used to convince him?
Best not.
Hermione gave herself a half shrug and sipped on her tea, a pensive expression on her face as she mulled over what Draco and Charlie had told her. Over the last year, she had secretly been working to become an animagus. Given her celebrity-like status, she disregarded the rules and avoided informing the Ministry of her intentions, not wanting to risk the information getting out. I don't want the whole wizarding world to watch me, she explained to Draco one evening not long after confiding in him about the goal she had set herself. I'm constantly observed as it is. The last thing I need to be is distracted by gossip about how far along I am and debates over whether I'll be able to do it. Dung would probably start a book on the odds of me succeeding and what form I might take.
I have every faith that you'll do it, and in record time, he replied. But you're right. If you inform the Ministry, it's bound to get out, and Dung would definitely run the book. The slippery bugger would make a killing.
She had indeed done it, as Draco knew she would. He was just as surprised as Hermione when she took on the form of a Hebridean black after drinking the carefully cultivated potion in the midst of a heavy electrical storm. The storm had been exceptionally powerful, so much so that it caused substantial damage across northern England where it hit landfall. Whether the power of the storm had influenced her transformation, or things would have turned out the same regardless, neither of them knew. What they did know, however, was that having a dragon as one's animagus was exceedingly rare. This presented a new problem. I definitely can't tell the Ministry now, Hermione said worriedly once she was in human form again. Who knows how they'd react? And it's not like I can just change into my animagus form at any opportunity anyway.
I'd have to be well away from other people. It's practically useless." She was almost hyperventilating at this point. Draco forced her to take a calming draught so she would be able to think more clearly. Hermione had been almost certain her animagus form would be an otter or similar small mammal, given the form of her Patronus, and the shock at the result had affected her greatly. "I'll go and talk to Charlie," she decided once she had calmed somewhat. "I'll need to know more about dragon physiology and capabilities, so I can become accustomed to my form and practice how to move naturally." Draco wasn't sure Charlie could be trusted, but Hermione empathetically defended the older Weasley. "Out of everyone I know, he's one of the few who can truly keep a secret," she explained. "And besides, since he's the only dragon expert I know, I don't feel I have many other options." Predictably, Charlie was enthralled and terribly excited to discover the form of Hermione's animagus. He'd made the mistake of asking her, while she was in her dragon form, whether she might take him for a ride. She snorted crossly and blew flames at him through her nostrils, and Charlie quickly apologized. Later, however, she relented and took not only Charlie but Draco as well for a short trip around the dragon reserve. It was the most thrilling and terrifying flying experience of Draco's life, and he suddenly had far more respect for the Golden Trio for having ridden the dragon out of Gringotts during the war. It wasn't until a few months after Hermione achieved her first transformation that she suddenly went missing in the middle of an assignment. She worked alongside Draco in the Department for the Regulation of and Control of Magical Creatures and had been dispatched to continue talks with a werewolf pack living in the Scottish Highlands. When she failed to return, Draco and several Aurors confronted the pack about her whereabouts, but her leader insisted she had never arrived. Weeks of fruitless searching followed, with Draco growing more distraught with every day that passed with no news. His arguments with Potter and Weasley, the sidekick one, who were in the Auror department, became legendary around the Ministry. Draco blamed them for not finding her quickly enough, and they suggested Draco or one of his maids must have something to do with it. It wasn't until there was a sudden spike of reports of dragon sightings across the UK that Draco started to feel hope again. The information that was coming in suggested it was a Hebridean black, and the sheer number of sightings by muggles meant the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes was very busy. He managed to convince his supervisor to assign him to the case and requested Charlie Weasley as his liaison. Together, Draco and Charlie tracked the dragon across the UK, following the reports, never quite managing to spot her for themselves, all the while trying to work out why, if indeed it was Hermione, why she hadn't returned to her human form. Was she stuck that way? Out of desperation, the two wizards finally confessed the situation to McGonagall, begging with her to help them. After giving them both a thorough dressing down for not coming to her sooner, the Transfiguration Professor got to work, researching the various factors which might cause an animagus to become trapped in their animal form. She quickly identified that dark magic could interfere with the individual's control over their transformation, which in turn led the group to immediately think of the curse Antonin Dolohov had hit her with during the fight in the Department of Ministries. Draco needed to interview Dolohov, but he would have no chance of getting in to see the Death Eater himself, and involving anyone in the Auror department, even Potter, would have caused further difficulties. In the end, McGonagall came through again. Using her influence and her formidable reputation, she managed to arrange a discreet visit for the three of them with Dolohov. From there, persuading Dolohov to talk fell to Draco and the arsenal of dark curses and hexes he'd been forced to learn while Voldemort resided at Malfoy Manor. At last, he'd found a use for them. Eventually, the Death Eater told them all they needed to know about the curse he used, how it affected the victim, and how to mitigate the damage. Now all they had to do was find a way to reverse the transfiguration so they could treat the curse. Oh, and, of course, catch Hermione in her dragon form.
And that's what happened, Draco finished. That's been our lives for the past few months, trying to find a way to get you back to being you while chasing you all over the United Kingdom.
Well, I'm terribly sorry to have inconvenienced you,
Hermione huffed, but despite her folded arms and exaggerated frown, he knew she wasn't really upset by his comment. After a moment of pouting, she dropped her hands into her laps with a sigh.
Is Minerva terribly cross with me?
She asked quietly.
You? Her favorite star student? Never.
Draco scoffed.
She was a bit put out that you didn't confide in her about your animagus training, but she was impressed to learn what form you took.
Truth be told, Charlie chimed in,
I think she was a bit disappointed you didn't turn her to a lion. A dragon is magnificent, but it isn't very Gryffindor-like. Neither is Hermione's penchant for vengeance when someone dares cross her. That's more of a Slytherin trait,
Draco said. Turning to Hermione, he added,
Perhaps the ruthless and terrifying part of your nature contributed to your final form.
She sighed.
I guess I'll never know for sure. Either way, I don't think I'll be transforming any time soon. I'd rather not get stuck again.
Hermione, how did you get stuck? Charlie asked. Do you remember?
I do, but only very vaguely, Hermione said. I decided I would try flying to meet the werewolf pack instead of apparating in several jumps. I found a secluded spot in the countryside just outside of London, and I recall willing to change. And that's it. Nothing after.
She shrugged helplessly.
I guess that's when Dolohov's curse activated. The first few times I was in my animagus form, I was fully cognizant of my surroundings and in complete control of myself. This time it was like I was a passenger. I saw through my dragon's eyes, felt what she felt, but I wasn't aware of myself. I know that makes no sense, but it's the best way I can think of to describe it.
Just then they were interrupted by a knock on Charlie's door. He went to answer it, and Draco could hear Belby on the other side.
Sorry to interrupt, but one of the shop blokes said I should look for you here and...
Belby's face peered past Charlie's large frame, and he gasped.
Is it? It's Hermione Granger.
Draco shot out of his seat and across the room, pushed past Charlie, and grabbed Belby by the arm, yanking him roughly inside.
Shh, he hissed. Don't bloody advertise it to the whole reserve.
Belby normally would have cowered in the face of Draco's sharp tone and withering glare. He was too entranced by Hermione's presence to take notice of his mentor's displeasure.
You're all right,
Belby exclaimed.
Everyone's been really worried. You've been missing for ages. We all thought some Death Eater got you, and this is huge.
He stepped slowly forward, his eyes wide as if he couldn't quite believe that Hermione was really there. Draco had a moment of panic as he realized that they didn't yet discuss how they would explain away her extended absence, and why no one had been able to find her previously. His eyes cut to Hermione. She was standing up and smiling, extending a hand.
Hello, Belby. Lovely to see you again. Yes, I'm quite all right, as you can see. How's your apprenticeship with Draco progressing?
Please, call me Norman. And my training is going well, thank you. At least, I think it is. I hope it is. It's good to see you again.
Belby babbled as he shook Hermione's hand with vigor.
That's enough, Belby. Give the witch some room to breathe, and for Merlin's sake, don't shake her arm out of its socket.
Belby let go of Hermione's hand as if it had suddenly burned him and stepped back, his head down and ears going red in response to Draco's reprimand.
Sorry, Miss Granger,
he mumbled.
I got a little carried away.
It's fine, Norman, Hermione said. I've grown accustomed to such warm welcomes, and my arm remains securely attached.
She glanced over at Draco and gave him a look that said, "That was completely unnecessary, you twit."
Now, of course you're perfectly right to wonder where I've been,
Hermione continued, leading Belby to the small couch that Draco and Charlie had recently vacated. They sat down together, and Hermione gently put 2 fingers under Belby's chin to make him look directly at her.
But what I'm about to say is very important. I need you to pay close attention and do everything I say."
"Yes, of course,"
Baby said. His eyes were wide with wonder, and he leaned forward slightly in anticipation of the information she was about to impart to him. "I had to divert from my assignment quite suddenly to attend an urgent and top-secret mission," Hermione said. "I couldn't inform anyone of my change in plans, as it may have compromised me otherwise. Unfortunately, it took a lot longer than I had hoped it would, and the risks were greater than what I had originally anticipated. My mission took me to several places, and I ended up close to the Dragon Reserve. Since Charlie Weasley is a close family friend and I needed a place to rest, I elected to reach out to him. I only just arrived several hours ago, about the same time that you did, but I had no idea that you and Draco would be here on assignment of your own. Because this was a top-secret mission, I can't tell you anything more about the specifics, but now that you're here, you can help with a very important task."
"Really? You want me to help?"
Belby said excitedly.
I'll do anything you need. What should I do?"
"I need you to help verify my story, the one I just told you. As you know, sentiment regarding Draco is not always favorable in the wizarding community. I know a few people have accused him of having had something to do with my absence, and I need you to help Charlie and I to disabuse them of this notion."
"Of course,"
Belby nodded.
"Is that all?"
"Yes. It's imperative that we keep things as calm as possible and don't do or say anything to fuel additional speculation. Merlin knows there will be enough already, regardless of what any of us say. And no matter what, you must stick to the fact. If anyone comes to you with additional theories or assumptions, they are entirely mistaken and you have nothing further to add. Is that understood, Norman?"
100%, Baby said. "I won't let you down, Miss Granger."
"Thank you. I know you'll make an excellent officer in our department." Hermione kissed Belby on the cheek, causing the younger man to blush furiously. Draco tried not to roll his eyes. The bloke was sure to be halfway in love with her now. And then again, that had probably been exactly what Hermione had been aiming for. Loyalty through adoration. Tricky witch. Soon after the potential crisis had been successfully averted, they prepared to head back to England. Hermione, Draco, and Charlie huddled together for a final debrief while Belby waited for them outside the hut. "What are we going to do about my condition?" Hermione worried. "What if something happens and my transformation gets away from me like it did before?" Draco offered a reassuring smile. "Already covered. We'll be spending some time with McGonagall and conducting further research. She runs some diagnostic spells, and she's recruited Theo not to take care of the potions side of things if needed. As if the potions professor he took an unbreakable vow and can be trusted not to reveal your secret. We'll beat this curse and ensure you don't lose control of your animagus powers again." Hermione breathed a sigh of relief. "Okay, that sounds good. Let's go home." She turned to Charlie and embraced him tightly, causing a momentary flash of jealousy to bloom in Draco's stomach. Logically, he knew there never had been and never would be anything between her and the Dragon Keeper. He couldn't help but be reminded that if he didn't make a move soon, another wizard might. And to top it off, he'd realized he could have lost her for good had it not been for his inside knowledge of her animagus form and a big helping of luck. He resolved to ask her out on a proper date just as soon as things had settled down. Having exchanged their goodbyes and their thanks with Charlie, he escorted them to the door.
"Come back and visit me soon, yeah?"
he urged, his eyes saying more than his words.
"Bring the Hebridean back for a visit once you deal with that curse."
Belby turned towards them with a grin.
"Are you ready to go? Grand. I'm looking forward to getting home."
He started to walk away, then stopped and looked back, his expression curious.
"Whatever happened to the Hebridean Black captured? Is she all right?"
"She's fine, resting and recovering," Charlie said.
"Thank you for your help in getting her here. Without your involvement, things might not have turned out so well for her. You'll be an asset to your department."
Belby beamed in response to the praise.
I'm glad. And thanks. It was great to meet you, Mr. Weasley.
He shook hands with Charlie, then joined Hermione and Draco as they headed towards the main office to organize a portkey back to England.
What an adventure that was,
Belby remarked dreamily.
I hope we have more like it soon.
Hermione laughed. Be careful what you wish for, young apprentice.
Agreed. I could do with some nice quiet office time,
Draco said.
I've had more than enough excitement to last me for the next few months.
They arrived at the main office, and after a short wait, their transportation was ready. Draco placed a discreet hand on Hermione's lower back as they gathered around the portkey, waiting for it to activate. She smiled warmly at him in a way that made his heart flutter with nervous excitement. The portkey glowed, and they all reached for it. Just before Draco felt the familiar pull behind his navel, Hermione's free hand slipped into his. The end. Thank you all so much for listening to this wonderful story by Art3misiA. I really hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to like and subscribe, especially because starting from the 1st of October, there will be a fall Halloween Fanfic festival happening on this very channel with a new one-shot or short stories. I think the maximum is 2 chapters every day. So you really don't want to miss that. It was a lot of fun recording it. It was a lot of work, and I'm so excited to share it with you. So I'm very happy if you guys stick around for that, and I will hear you very soon.